Boy, there's been a lot that has happened since last Thursday when we caught up, Tim Hauraney. It's been a crazy weekend. And you know, the thing is, the Spanish Grand Prix, fantastic racing from start to finish. We had multiple leaders. We had a potential race at the end, but then a holdup, and Zach Brown's mad, and Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc are mad. The only team that seems to be happy, Tim, are Red Bull. Because I think they feel like they got away with one.
I think,
and they're the ones that are always at war.
I think Zach's happy. Like, I don't think he's like not happy, and the team is definitely happy for sure. I mean, at McLaren, but I mean, as for like Carlos and Charles Leclerc, I don't necessarily think they're particularly happy with each other. And you know, we can get into that in a minute. But I think like seeing what Max had done on the weekend, Adam, was pretty impressive. I mean, that's probably the most pressure I think I've seen him under for a race win in quite some time. I would say probably, you know, the last 2 years. Like he was really pushed on Sunday. Not the fastest car either. So I think like if you're him, you're happy about that. But I mean, if you're Red Bull, you're extra happy about that. And I think it just shows Adam like the differences between Red Bull, like being out front, knowing how to win, close out races, and then McLaren still starting to like learn that process. I mean, we have to remember it's different being at the front than it is being midfield or at the back. Like there's a lot that really changes. And when it comes down to the racing being as close as it was this weekend, because this is probably, I would say, the closest I have ever seen Formula One in my entire life. And statistically, it is probably the closest we've ever seen it. Then you have to be like really sharp when it comes to your strategy, your execution, knowing which tire and compound is going to be the fastest way forward, and then having an understanding and a feel for the race and for when you're in the lead of a race and how to make those, you know, knee-jerk reaction calls. Like, I think, you know, well, it was the fastest strategy, soft, medium, soft. We saw Red Bull go with that strategy, but we also saw them, you know, bring Max in a little bit earlier than what a lot of us thought that he was going to come in. And then you saw Lando not only getting that bad start, but then having to manage his way through cars that weren't as fast as he was, and understanding how to protect the tire in that situation. Like, what does he have to do? Like, so there's a lot that really went into it for McLaren as a team to try and pull out that win. I think, you know, if there's probably like 5 or 6 more laps, Norris and Verstappen, you know, probably have a really, really good fight towards the end. And I think Lando comes away with the win simply because I think it was like the last 2 laps for Max were like some of his slowest, not because he was slowing down, but because the tire had just literally dropped off a cliff. There was nothing left on that thing because he was pushing it so hard for so long. And even though he was in clean air, it still shows you that McLaren is the top of the pack because of the way they handle the tire. I would say they're probably the best suited at handling the race tires now, Adam. McLaren is. And, and you know, if we go back last year, like it was all Red Bull, right? Red Bull had that supreme understanding of how to do that. But in this race, I think we really saw that, you know, McLaren is top of the pile, I think. For sure.
Well, it sure seems that way. And I think that part of me has to wonder, too, like, I know Oscar had a bit of a rough qualifying, you know, only getting into 10th. And, you know, that's not bad, but it's not, you know, where you now expect him to be because he set the bar a little bit higher. We'll talk about Lando in a second. Oscar had a good race, but I think that the expectations are now higher than 7th. Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure they are. I think it's just, Adam, again, it comes down to like having that understanding of tire management. And that's something that, you know, Oscar has talked to me about before several times. This wouldn't be the first sort of iteration of it. I think essentially it's just having that experience. And it's just so important when it comes to, you know, Pirelli tires, managing the tire. how to manage it within a race when you're in traffic, in dirty air, in clean air, and then understanding what you need to do with it and when, and the execution of that. I would say for Oscar, still learning that, and a lot of drivers are. I mean, that's just the way it is. It takes a long time to master these tires within a race. And so I think for Oscar, yeah, definitely disappointed in the finishing result, considering where the car actually is. But again, I think that just shows you like how much more, Oscar still has to learn. But again, I wouldn't be, upset having having him as one of my drivers, because like, he's an excellent driver. Let's not kid ourselves.
No, he's been
only his second year, right?
Yeah, he's great. It's just you're talking about a sophomore guy who still has things to learn. And I mean, look at Lando had the most podiums in history before getting a race win. Like, it takes a while, right? And obviously Lando didn't have the car either for a lot of that. But with Lando Norris, coming up just a little short here, Tim. The thing that I think drove Zach Brown probably the most crazy was the pit stop, I would imagine. Even giving a second on that pit stop. I don't know what it was. It seems like a wheel gun got stuck. Things do happen. But 3.6 seconds, McLaren is known for their pit stops. They're known for their sub-2 pit stops. I think the last couple of years, both times they've had the fastest pit stop on the grid. And for them to have a 3.6 with George and Lewis barreling down the straightaway, they cut it pretty close.
I would say, yeah, like on top of that pit stop sort of snafu. I mean, obviously Red Bull leads the way with the pit stops for quite a while now. They've been really great at it, and McLaren not too far behind them for sure. And when you look at the overall like finish, what was it, 2 seconds from Lando to Max, and then you add in the second for the stop, maybe that equates itself onto the track, and then maybe you're looking at a bit closer of a finish. And that's the fine details that we're now having to unpack from these races, which is the difference. And so I can see the team being upset with that. I can see Lando, being disappointed with not getting the win. And I think for him, he should be. They have a car now that is on par, I would say, like I said, top of the heap when it comes to, everyone on the grid. And I think what's left now is that experience, like I was saying, of being out front and attacking a race. And, that falls on the entire team. I think one of the things that Andrea Stella does so well with this team is analyzing everything that they do at the track at the end of a race weekend. So when we get to Monday, Tuesday, sitting down, reviewing everything with the team, what could they have done better? What could they have fixed, improved upon? What do they need to fix and improve upon? And basically taking all of your faults, your weaknesses, your mistakes, putting them up front and seeing how they can avoid those mistakes in the future. And so not necessarily having to deal with them again. You're fast tracking, you're fast tracking your team. So you're more prepared in the future. But I like the fact that Andrea does that, going backwards to move forwards sort of thing. And simply for Lando not being, happy, just with a podium finish, he wants race wins. And I think another thing, when we look at Lando and we talked to him, and I was talking to him in Canada, I remember like, dude was so bummed because I put it to him that, the safety car, what happens if that safety car comes out a little bit later? And, he was absolutely, devastated by how, that was handled, and how, maybe he should have pitted at a certain time. But these are all things that he has to go back and take a look at, and for him and to learn whether or not it's up to him to make that decision and really force his will upon the team. And I think for Lando being so self-critical, I like that from him, because it tells me that he's willing to say, hey, put his hand up saying like, hey, yeah, I screwed up the start of the race. Like the second phase of his getaway at the start of the Spanish Grand Prix could have been better. I mean, you could hear the wheel spin through his onboard camera. Like you can see it's just that little tiny bit. And then we'll get into George obviously in a minute because he was coming like a freight train. But I like the fact that for Lando, goes back, analyzes everything, and takes a look at like what he could have done better, because that's what makes these guys, champions at the end of the day. They dig deep and they look at what they can do to be a better driver, and really uncovering and overturning every single stone that they can. And that's a winning mindset, in my opinion. And I like that from Lando, because it pushes it. You can see that pushes him.
So, let's talk about George Russell a little bit here, because, George is sort of the unsung hero for Mercedes and for Max Verstappen, weirdly enough, because he held up Lando. He tried out the hard tires so that Lewis could try out could get some data and get on the podium. What was George Russell's race, and why were McLaren so upset with him afterwards?
I don't think McLaren
like competitively
was,
upset.
Upset. I don't think like they were like literally upset with him, just simply because George is going to do George, right? And every driver has to do themselves when they're out there. It's a selfish sport at the end of the day for some parts of it, and you got to do that. I mean, what a pass from George! I mean, it's absolutely incredible off the start. He had spent Saturday night envisioning his start and what it would look like and what it would feel like, and then going and practicing that on the formation lap, practicing the braking points for turn one. Where could he brake the latest? Where was the grip? And those are just those small, fine little details that make a driver so good, right? Is just really unpacking everything, even on a formation lap. And I think that's brilliant. I think that's brilliant from him, and it showed. It was an incredible pass. Like I thought that was going to be an absolute disaster. Mm-hmm. I thought that was ending in a crash between all three, between Verstappen, Norris, and Russell. I think Lando gave him just enough room to make sure that he got that done. I think for Lando, it was smart for him to drop back at that moment, because I think if he had have forced it, they would have had a clash, for sure. And so I think you've got to give up that spot to George, and same for Max, because Max obviously being down the inside as well. I mean, again, it comes down to if Lando gets a bit better of a start, maybe the slipstream is not as strong, because it was extremely strong, and that benefited Russell for sure. But that throws a wrench into McLaren's plans and Lando's plans, right? It does, but this is racing, right? And this is what these guys are supposed to be doing. So it's fantastic stuff for us to watch. I thought George would have been able to hang on to that lead for a little bit longer, but I mean, it was pretty impressive to see like how fast Max was coming in and past him to take back over the lead. I mean, that was some serious stuff from Verstappen. Something I want to take a closer look at later on this week, but I think for George and for Lewis, both of them splitting that strategy, and Mercedes having to really do that. The team itself, I mean, it's a positive step forward for the team, at a track that would normally have really challenged them earlier in the season. If you were to go to this track, say race 2 or 3, or even go to do your testing there, it would have been a disaster. Like they would have been struggling probably to make it out of Q2. But solid points haul for them. I think obviously, they didn't have the pace to race with Max and Lando, and George giving it a shot was a positive thing to see. But I think, Adam, they're still missing probably about 0.3, I would say, to the lead group. So the 0.3 to like Red Bull, McLaren, maybe Ferrari. I mean, Ferrari had a difficult weekend, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But I think like they're still missing just a tiny bit, but it's pretty impressive to see the step that they have made just simply from a new front wing on this car. Like,
yeah, Yeah.
Like that's really impressive. And then obviously having some floor updates as well. Yeah, it's definitely trending in the right direction for Mercedes, and it's trending a lot quicker than I think a lot of us expected, and even the team as well. I think
Yeah.
I think Austria next week could be good track for them.
Okay. All right. And by the way, who do you like for uh, who do you like for Austria? Just early, just based on what you saw this past week, is it a Red Bull? I mean, you'd hope it's a Red Bull track because but no. So you're not feeling that so much, Tim?
I don't know, man. It's kind of like the constructors' standings at the moment is not indicative of like where we're at. Like it's like obviously Red Bull has the clear lead because of how well they did at the beginning of the season and the advantage that they started with, and then everyone else has now made these huge steps forward to catch up. That it honestly, you have 3-4 teams who are pushing their way up to the top, and for me, I think McLaren's going to be extremely strong in Austria. Red Bull will be strong, obviously, as well. Mercedes, I think, that probably is going to be a good track for them too. So, I mean, Ferrari, you should talk about them in a minute, but for Ferrari, like I don't know. We'll see how that goes for them.
Okay. Yeah. And you know what, Tim, it's probably a good time to say that I just want to slip this in because we did kind of touch on McLaren earlier. The fact that Lando was able to get a couple extra points for fastest lap and pole sitter, I think is key, right? Like that is, getting the most out of it. And he is now second place in the driver's standings. And that is not what people expected this year, which brings us to Ferrari. We keep waiting for them to break out. We keep waiting for it to happen. There was the Sainz win. There was the Charles win. We're like, okay, is it time for them to be dominant yet? And after this weekend, we have some comments from Charles Leclerc saying, it wasn't the moment to fight. He damaged my front wing. I guess he wanted to impress at his home race considering the moment in his career. It's too many times, and so that was what Charles said, and then Carlos said it's too many times that after the race that he complains about something. So there's tension building between these guys who aren't going to be teammates after the next 15-20 races. If Charles thinks right now is hard, just wait till Lewis gets there. I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Tim, because they keep finishing in and around the same spot. They are racing each other a lot. So there's some tension building up. And the reality is that Carlos has raced really, really hard this year, and that's put Charles under a lot of pressure.
Oh, Adam, this was always going to happen. And we said this. It was you, I, and Jesse. We sat down and we said this when Lewis signed with Ferrari. We said that this was going to be an issue between Sainz and Leclerc. Mm-hmm. And when it comes down to it, how do they treat each other when they are on the racetrack? Now, for the most part, it's been, fairly respectable. Like I'm not too upset about the battle between the two of them on track in Spain. I think it was honestly from everybody, it was good, hard racing like all weekend. And I have no problem with that. I like good, hard racing. It's when you deliberately go to just absolutely take someone out that we have some issues. But I mean, both of them fighting for the same piece of real estate. It was, in my opinion, fairly clean. I think, when we talk about space, mm-hmm. I mean, did Sainz give Charles a load of space on that one? I mean, probably not, but he's making sure that he's trying to beat his teammate, and things were always going to get, spicy between the two of them out on the racetrack. And so I think obviously being your home race, Carlos is going to do what he's got to do. Right. And also this guy doesn't have a contract for next year. He still doesn't. So he doesn't there is no contract signed at this moment, from my understanding. He's still fighting out there. And so I don't have an issue with this at all. I like the fact that they're fighting on the track. As a driver, you're always going to get feisty when you get out of the car. And so look, I understand both of them saying what they said. I have no issue with it either. I think it's great. And it's great for us. And so at the end of the day, I mean, I think Charles needs to understand that like nothing is going to come easy with his teammate. He probably already knows that. He doesn't need me to say that. And same goes for Carlos. He knows he's got to fight for every inch on track, and he's got to try and make himself look as good as possible, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and it appears that Alpine are now, by the way, double points for Alpine this race. Double points for Alpine. Interesting. With Flavio Briatore joining in a consulting role, there's rumors that Alpine are now a new manufacturer in on Carlos Sainz, and I can't imagine why, given all the mess at Alpine, why Carlos Sainz would want to sign there, other than they are usually able to put together a pretty good mid-pack car, and two, they have lots of money. What would be how much truth do you put into those rumors, by the way, Tim?
Okay, so let's start with Flavio, because there's a lot going on here. Okay, yeah. So when you and I first heard about it, like, were you surprised?
Yes, I was. I mean, he was the one that created the. You were not surprised.
Oh, I was surprised. Everybody was surprised.
Yeah, I mean, for people that don't know, Flavio Briatore was he ran Renault. And
the team, the F1 team. Yeah.
And can you talk about the scandal where he asked one driver to crash so the other could win, allegedly?
Yeah, that was back in 2008 in Singapore, and then Flavio, obviously, he had the book thrown at him, suspended from Formula One for quite some time. Able to come back in the last few years. Now being with Alpine, I mean, he's also done driver deals before. I mean, he's a big part of Fernando Alonso contract deals in the past. Whether or not he still does that, I'm unsure of. I'm pretty sure he probably still does. But with Alpine now, he's more of he's an outside sort of advisor, advising them on, driver decisions, team structure, in strategic matters is what I read. I'm not too sure what that actually means, but he's been working with F1 now for quite a few years. Like, actually been working like with Stefano Domenicali, and so he's very plugged in, and he's always been very plugged in, even when he had his suspension, very plugged in with the F1 paddock and what was happening within Formula One. If you take a look at Pat Simmons, I mean, Pat Simmons was a part of that thing that happened in Singapore as well. And Pat Simmons was able to go on and work with other teams, work with F1 as well. So I am not I'm not overly upset about the fact that Flavio is working within F1, and I think it's a bit of an issue that he's come back to Alpine, Renault.
Yeah.
That's a little, maybe should have thought of going somewhere else maybe, but
right.
I mean, hey, he's gone on to speak with Carlos Sainz's camp, from my understanding. So he's already hit the ground running with this current position. This weekend in Barcelona, he had some conversations with Carlos Sainz's camp. They're listening to him. So if they're listening to what Flavio has to say, I mean, I think that means that Carlos Sainz hasn't signed on the dotted line at any team. And so now there's 3 teams in contention for Sainz's services. It's trying to pick what's the best one for him to go to. Where is he going to get the best deal?
Yep.
And where is he going to think that he's going to be able to succeed? So he could potentially try to find a way of getting back up to the top of the field later on. Yeah, so I would say, like, I mean, the thing with Flavio is he knows everything that's going on in the paddock, right? Like, he just does.
And that's the interesting part is, as much as a lot of people see that as a deal with the devil, nobody can doubt that Flavio is a guy that gets things done. And Alpine seem to be significantly lacking in people that could get things done. Now, are the kinds of things that Flavio wants to do, to get done, do they align with your organization? Because he is going to do what he is going to do, right? Like, that's just the way this guy is. Maybe this lasts for maybe this is a 3 to 5 year thing, and then they blow it up again and it goes their separate ways. But Alpine knows, and it's a double-edged sword, that they've got a bit of a weapon here. And I don't know why. I know why Carlos Sainz's people would listen. I don't know why he would sign there, unless there's some sort of crazy plan that Alpine's on, that they believe that they're going to be a challenger. And they're in tough.
Yeah. I mean, well, when you look at Luca De Mio, so he would be the one that Flavio would be, I guess, supporting or going to, and Luca De Mio is, Renault CEO, and he's obviously having to make decisions on the race team instead of Bruno Famin, which is kind of a head scratcher for me. And it's kind of similar with when Otmar was there. It's kind of like, okay, well, you brought him in to run the team, and why isn't he running the team, right? It's kind of like you've got big, executive over top sort of looking over racing situations when they're not necessarily been in racing, right? So to have Flavio sort of come on and either pitch him ideas or strategically helping guide him in the direction that maybe that he thinks the team needs to go in, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, maybe that helps them move forward with a 2026 power unit for that season, right? Maybe it is Flavio that helps them consider moving forward on the project, where there's rumors that they're going to be pulling out of it. So those are certain things that we have to take a look at for sure, because if you're trying to look out for the best interests of the team, then maybe he is that guy who comes in and helps in that situation. But again, like, it was still such a strange hire. It just caught all of us off by guard. Like, I didn't ever expect him to go back there.
No, it seemed to be a well-kept secret, which is a weird thing in F1, isn't it, Tim? Like, it's difficult to keep a secret. And for that to just drop on everybody, that was a shock.
Big time.
Tim, what do you think about what do you think about the what do you think this says about Alpine's mindset? What do you think this says about what they want to get done?
That's a great question. I think, like, obviously they, I think they're taking it seriously. I mean, when I say that, you kind of look at seriously, and then you bring back, Flavio, and you're like, seriously. so there's that part of it, right? But I mean, again, they must believe that he can help them with this team and just help maybe put a bit of a guiding hand on some of the business aspects of it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because maybe they're failing in that part of things, right? I mean, I think they're definitely not doing well. They're definitely not doing well off track, Adam. I mean, like, especially when we've got these rumors floating around that they're considering pulling their 2026 engine program. I mean, that's a serious thing. When there's smoke, there's some fire there, right? So I am impressed with how they've recovered on track, like extremely impressed. I mean, what is this? Their second double points finish for the team so far this season, second in a row after finishing P9, P10 and back in Canada. So, they do look like they're headed in the right direction when we started this, I mean, Adam, like we were literally like, they're going to be one of the worst teams in Formula One. Like, it was shocking. That was absolutely shocking. And you and I discussed it when we were back in Bahrain. So I think from the moves that the team's been able to make, it's been quite positive on track. I think third points finish in a row for Pierre, Monaco, Canada, Spain, like it says a lot. And so it does say that, the team, there is something there, right? Like there is. And it's just trying to get it all to come together. And again, we had a whole podcast on why they need to come together.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Issues. Well,
and with Gasly, a Gasly Sainz pairing would be pretty strong. I mean, a Gasly, I think, doesn't get the flowers he deserves. He's a very skilled driver. He just unfortunately didn't work out for him at the Red Bull senior team. But if they're able to, and he's been very good for them this year, if they're able to stay out of crashes, which has been a bit of his Achilles heel, and if him and Esteban could just pull it together, a Carlos Pierre pairing sets up to be, they'd both be competitive, but you get the sense that they both get along to the point where it wouldn't be toxic within the team. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
absolutely. And so I wonder with, Flavio's the kind of guy that seems to be, you're either on his team or you're not. And if you're not, you're out. And I wonder if we're going to see, I wonder how the Alpine, the rest of the staff is going to announce or going to get on board with this, because obviously they probably don't have a choice. And what is the reaction of this? Where do all that, they've already had a diffusion of talent. They've all so much of their great talented people that have been there for years have left. And so, what does Flavio bring in his people? And he's got good people. Is Fernando Alonso in for a fourth run with a Renault engine? I don't think so. Yeah. No, I think he's happy where he's at. Yeah. But, it's just this opens up a lot of possibilities for a team that seemed to be listless. So in a weird way, you're almost excited, but I'm also a little bit like, this is a really odd hire. So it could make it worse or it could make it better. But one thing's for sure, it's not going to stay the same.
Well, it could also lend a hand in the driver market, right? If you've got, because Flavio, if he's able to get pique Carlos Sainz's interest, his camp, which, he has. I mean, when Flavio comes to talk to you, you definitely are going to listen. So, I mean, serious guy when it comes to that kind of stuff too, off track. And I think, they're happy with Pierre. Like it does sound like Pierre will be back with the team, and he's doing in their words, I think he's doing a pretty great job. But, before we came on to record this, Adam, Alpine, sent me a message to confirm that Jack Doohan and Mick Schumacher are going to be taking part in a test next week at Paul Ricard in an older spec F1 car. So that's definitely going to be able to give them a clearer picture on drivers, right? It's going to eliminate one of them for the running for that seat for sure, I think. And I think if you look at just, how well, I mean, I guess for going back to my Gasly point, one of the reasons why I think if you take a look at just how, just why you would kind of hold on to him, in this race on Sunday, after Perez's pit stop, it was literally a straight fight to the end between himself, Pierre for P8. I think, Gasly was on hards, 2-stop. Perez was on softs for 3-stopper, and he'd done well. So, I mean, you see that. So that definitely kind of acknowledges that you're going in the right direction with that seat.
Yeah.
The second part of it is, do you want to take advantage of your driver pool, your young driver program, because you have invested time and money into it. And if you've got a diamond in the rough there, that's really important that you make sure that they get into F1. I understand why you would want to go after Carlos Sainz, ton of experience, Grand Prix winner, was at Ferrari, can bring a lot of information to you. Whether or not they can offer him everything that he wants, that would be the sticking point of the conversation, I feel. And then what are your 2026 plans? So you're evaluating your young drivers, which is great. You're now trying to go after a bigger fish, which is also great. But your 2026, what does that look like? Is it going to be an Alpine Renault power unit in the back of that thing, or is it going to be a Honda or Mercedes or whatever? Right? What does that look like? So if I'm that big fish, if I'm Carlos Sainz, definitely looking at that. But then I think you have Flavio who gets in the mix. Maybe he convinces Carlos to come over, and maybe he convinces Alpine to stick with the program.
Right. And listen, people forget this, but Carlos was a Renault driver until Daniel Ricciardo's came in. In retrospect, I don't remember how it all went down, Tim, but it seems like, and with no disrespect to Nico Hülkenberg, it would have been smarter for Renault to hang on to Carlos Sainz and pair him with Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah,
I don't remember why that happened the way that it did, but
I don't know. That's a difficult one. I mean, Ricciardo's stock was so high at that point, right? Like Daniel had an incredible run, like 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. I think like Daniel had put his stock so high, and I think for Renault at that time, because again, different management structure at the team, different people running the team, that by having someone like Daniel come in and help, push everybody a little bit further, which they did, because, and I think in Daniel's second year at Renault, Adam, that team was coming along in a pretty good trajectory. It was all the stuff that was happening off track, man. It was all the stuff happening behind the scenes. So if you can find a way to keep it all together, I mean, you got the bones of a good engine manufacturer team here.
Yeah, I wonder if they finally bite the bullet and move the factory to England.
Yeah, who knows about that? I don't even know. Like the space at, I mean, the question would be, Adam, is like whether or not the space in Enstone that they already have, if there's enough to either extend it and to build off of it, because then you're talking about, getting new property, buying a bunch of acreage. Where is that? And then building a whole new factory. The thing with Aston Martin, which makes it such a great little deal, was that, they had already encompassed the land and they had the facility, and it was easy for them to just transfer everything slowly over to the new facility. Like it was a really smart idea. And so for Alpine, I think honestly, man, it'd have to be something like that.
Beyond that, couple of just to work our way down the grid. Not a great weekend for Williams or Racing Bulls or VCarb or whatever they're called. Just seems to be a track that didn't suit either of their cars. Do you think they'll be back for the next race, like in points contention?
Well, I think like Adam, for Williams in particular, like they knew they were going to struggle here. Like Alex even said that at the beginning of the weekend, like this was going to be a track where they were going to have some issues. They didn't have the straight line speed that they did last year, right? Like they just don't. But looking at a track like Austria, I mean, it could be a good place for Williams. But then again, take a look at RB. They brought, man, that was almost a B-spec car. Like, did you see how many components they brought to that thing?
Yeah,
like
they did.
Holy hell, man! Like that thing was fully developed. Where I thought, like, hold on a second here, are we doing an entirely new car here? Because that's exactly what this thing looks like, honestly. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, okay. So, front corner of the RB, you had the Coke and engine cover, also brand new. Whole side pod inlets, an entire new floor, an entire rear wing, brand new beam wing. This thing looked absolutely so different from what it started the season as, but at the same time, Adam, like we don't even know what happened underneath the engine cover. We have no idea what happened with, spring, suspension, damper. That we no clue. So that could have had a whole refresh. Same with the radiator layout. That could have had a whole refresh too. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like having an understanding of what what you have for them, smaller team, takes a while, and understanding your upgrade, Adam. Like I wouldn't just sit here and say like, oh, it was they brought this new package and it doesn't work and it's a terrible weekend for RB and they're lost and all this stuff. I would say that hold your horses, let them get a couple races to understand what they got, and then we'll see where this thing moves forward, because who knows, this could turn out to be a really good upgrade for them.
Yeah, and so the other team I wanted to bring up, because Sauber was Sauber, right? Like just not expecting a whole lot from the car this year. Aston Martin, not the greatest race for either driver, although they finished around the same spot, so it speaks to where the car was at. What do you think's going on there?
Yeah, I think coming into Canada, Adam, I had said that remember they had the Imola upgrade, which they brought, and it did what it was supposed to do, but the car wasn't riding curbs very well, and it still needed a bigger step forward compared to what everybody else was bringing, right? So there's a couple things happening. Is that one, the car has taken a step. That step not big enough,
right?
It has nothing to do with losing the direction. They know the direction they need to go in, and then two, it's everybody else making advancements and bigger steps. Right. And getting on top of things faster. So that's the likes of Mercedes, that's the likes of McLaren, Ferrari, and that's them understanding and pushing forward with updates to the car, where, Aston Martin has been bringing updates, but I don't think those updates are matching or are big or as big as what everybody else is doing as well. And so it's going to be a couple races of pain here for them. I thought, honestly, man, I thought Canada was going to be an absolute disaster for them, but it was a great drive by both drivers to get that car where it was. That wasn't a point scoring car at all. And I thought both drivers did a great job of making it a point scoring car. This particular weekend, again, I honestly don't even think that's a Q2 car. Both drivers doing a good job of getting that thing in there. Man, like it's
a Q2 car, Tim. Oh my God.
Yeah, I just think it's a shocking weekend for them, right? It just is. It's not good, but we'll see what happens with the next round of upgrades, which will probably be coming, I think, before summer break, I think. So that's going to be important. But I think like Austria might be tough, and I think Silverstone's going to be tough for them too. They need a bigger round of updates to this thing, and they need it fast, because we're in like they already know, we're in a development war, and that's what this thing is. So okay. But like you saw the rumors, right? When we came on the tape this morning. So you're like, oh yeah.
What are the rumors, Tim?
Well, there was a rumor, and Adam, you had sent it to me. That Ferrari technical director Enrico Cardile is rumored to be heading to Aston Martin. So for those not familiar who this gentleman is, so he works at Ferrari. He's a big part of what they do with their car at Ferrari. I would say he is one of, if not one of the key factors as to why this car has been, not the last two races, but races before that, been really strong and has won a Grand Prix. And this is it's a very talented individual who I think anyone in the paddock would want him on their team. And so the rumor is that he's headed to Aston Martin. I mean, currently head of Ferrari's chassis aerodynamics department. That's an exciting story if it turns out to be true.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I wondered when I sent that, does that mean Adrian Newey?
I mean, it wouldn't hurt.
Well, the Newey rumors have kind of gone away, and I was like, okay, well, chief technical director, like, would
Adam,
he not?
they were in full force in Spain. Like, they were in full force.
They were. Okay.
Remember, like, they had closed down the factory.
Oh, right.
And, like, Adrian Newey came in to close down. Hold on a second. Nobody closes down their factory because they go 24/7. Like, no one's closing down the factory, first of all. Whether or not he was there for a tour, I don't know. I don't know that. But again, like, it definitely wouldn't hurt. But, like, think of it this way: you're not really bringing in Adrian Newey to take over, like, this particular position that Cardile would come in and do. He would simply be overseeing, like, the entire aerodynamic suspension philosophy. Like, he would basically look over the entire umbrella and to try and see, like, how can we make sure this whole car is working within itself. For Cardile, he would be a person you would bring in to oversee your entire technical department. So that's, I would say that's probably like Dan Fallows, Eric Blandin, like those guys at Aston Martin, making sure aerodynamically they're going in the right direction. It's working with suspension, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But that's the type of guy you would want to oversee it, to give, not to say, I'm not saying that, Fallows and Blandin are leaders, but he would come in a leadership sort of role.
I got it.
If that were to happen. I mean, I'm trying to find out more information on it. That's a great hire if they're able to get him. That would be incredible.
Okay. Well, Tim, I'm looking forward to this week. I mean, we're in the midst of 3 straight race weeks, which is incredible. I love this. And they're great races too. I mean, Barcelona and then the Red Bull Ring and then Silverstone. It's summer and it's beautiful.
Well, we also got some questions, Adam. Do we want to dive into a couple? All right. So we have Tamara Sutherland asks, last week, Carlos Sainz said he needed a few days post-Spanish Grand Prix to really look at his options for next year. But was there any indication over the weekend that he was leaning either way? Other drivers in limbo have started to be more vocal that he's the cork in a bottle. That is a great, that's a really great observation because, like, you can kind of feel, Adam, the tension in that driver market where it's kind of like, okay, make your decision. Like, you can feel the drivers just being like, make your decision, Carlos, because we need to make our decisions, because he is that first one sort of off the board, and then the dominoes will start to fall. I think Carlos does make a decision before Silverstone, though. But yeah, I think, Adam, you can feel that sort of tension of like where, of the drivers wanting to know where their futures are going to land and just pushing this guy to hurry up and make a choice of where he wants to go. As like where Carlos wants to go, I mean, now that Alpine has sort of entered the conversation, I mean, you really do have 3 teams now that he is having to choose between and look at where is he going to get the best deal, where does he think the team's going to be most competitive, et cetera, et cetera. So at this point, everything that we had talked about like before the race weekend is probably now null and void now that Alpine has entered this conversation, because that he's now got 3 camps, and he hasn't signed anything yet. So from Ron, if Perez keeps his current points performance, do you think there is a possibility that he gets moved to Racing Bulls? This is Red Bull. These guys have always seemed ruthless when it comes to driver performance. Adam, what do you think?
I mean, there's got to be provisions in that contract, Tim. But
it has to be,
I think that's the last thing Christian Horner wants to do. He wants to get Max and other and other drivers. It almost feels like they're less concerned about the constructors. They just want the drivers. I don't know why. Maybe it's to retain Max. But Sergio's got to bring it up, because listen, Helmut Marko is going to start spouting off to the German newspapers here in the next week or so. You just know how it's going to happen. These are bad races that he's putting in. These times are not acceptable. You need more from Sergio. You need to be going for the double championship this year.
Yeah, which brings us on to the next question from Farina. Apologies if I messed up your name. Is Red Bull okay with losing the constructors? Definitely not okay with that. I mean, I think you said it well, Adam. You need Sergio to be better than what he is, and you need him closer to Max, whatever that takes. I mean, even Christian Horner even admitted it at the end of the race too, right? They need to get Checo, need to get his confidence back, need to get him back up towards where Max is, because honestly, man, they will lose the constructors if this keeps happening. They 100% will, because you have now McLaren and both Ferrari and potentially Mercedes starting to take points away.
Yes. Yeah.
So that means you're on par to be losing this constructors rather than actually winning it. And now that you've seen how far McLaren has come in the last few races, they're only going to get more competitive from here on out. Last one is from Austin Forrest. What prevents F1 teams from tanking and putting all of their cost cap towards next year's car? They would then get more wind tunnel time as well. Think it could help a team like Williams, who needs to modernize their infrastructure? Interesting question, Adam. Like, I think like taking some of your money from that cost cap. I mean, remember that next year still is a cost cap, right?
Yes, it is.
You're just basically trying to find ways of digging into next year's car sooner, and how can you do that? The wind tunnel CFD design time that each team gets reset at the end of this month. And so once it gets reset, basically you're picking it up again from where everybody currently lays within the constructor standings. So Red Bull still having to take a huge cut. But for Williams, being so far down in the constructors, I mean, again, it does benefit them in terms of getting their car further up the grid with all the wind tunnel and CFD design time that they have. So, tanking, it's tough, because if you look at it this way, part of the way you run your business, right, Adam, is that whatever you're going to win in terms of monetary. So let's say if you're going to finish like 7th in the constructors, then you would be aiming for, this is how much we're winning from the constructors. This is how much we have to put towards next year. And so that means that you need to find another supplemental sort of income to cover off the rest of the cost cap, so you can then keep moving forward. So it's tough when you're like, hey, I want to finish 10th and get all of the wind tunnel and CFD design time, but you're not getting any money.
Yeah.
So then you can't really. So it's like, what is it? Chicken and the egg, right?
Yeah. Well, and they used to have these things. The teams that had them, they would go 24/7, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's Well, I don't know, Tim. I'm. It's getting to that point of the season where, and you promised us this would happen, and I have to be honest, when you said it in Bahrain, I was like, I don't know. It's Max has been dominating for so long. I don't know. It's getting to the point where this every inch is going to matter here soon. Yeah. I mean, it already is, but like really and truly, one team that I did not see taking such a big step forward was Mercedes. I thought, that's going to be not great until the next regulations, and look at them go. I mean, this is crazy. Like just the way that that one wing and helmet Marco. You always know that teams are upset when helmet Marco's like, well, we're going to be watching to see if it's legal. Like, stop it. Stop. You're choked because somebody's catching you, and you definitely don't want Mercedes catching you, right?
Yeah.
That would be the ultimate insult.
Yeah. And one of the things, Adam's referring to there is the flexi wing debate. So how much deflection is on their front wing. And I mean, look, everybody's wings flex. It has to do with the degree of deflection. And so if the FIA aren't finding anything wrong with it, then, all the other teams are going to be doing the exact same thing, and they're going to measure it out to the exact same detail that Mercedes is doing. And that doesn't take long for them to catch that up. So,
no,
I mean, what Mercedes is doing, what Red Bull is doing, I mean, all front wings have to flex. They just do. But I think, Adam, you bring out a good point that this is probably some outstanding beef from the past.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Well, I think it also tells you, Adam, that like everybody is catching up. Like I think McLaren is caught up. Like they have. I think they have a great car. I think they have a better car than Red Bull does now. But you now see that like Mercedes has really made a huge push. And when you hear James Allison say, "We're a bunch of idiots. We should have been doing this way. It's the simplest of fixes," then you kind of know that team is on pace for something good as well. I mean, it shows you, and you had said it so well, that it's fine details, and that's what we're going to be picking out from this thing moving forward, is all of these fine little details that are going to add up to victories, podiums, points, etc. And Adam, like, I don't know, like a couple bad things happened to Max in some races. I mean, who's to say that? And we have a lot of races to go, people. Like we have a lot of races left. Who's to say that like Max can still win this championship? I think he can. I mean, he was extremely impressive on Sunday, just to hold on. But who's to say that like Lando can't catch up even more? Who's to say that, you know, Charles Leclerc can't catch up even more? Can Carlos Sainz? I don't know. I still think he's a little too far back. I think the Mercedes drivers are too far back. But I still think like Norris and Leclerc are still sort of hanging around. Like I wouldn't say contention, but they're hanging around.
They're hanging around. And I think second place is important to both of them too. Like obviously they want first, but I do think, you know, I think it would be a pretty big boon for Lando to be second place at the end of this season. And at least make Max sweat a little bit, you know?
Well, like it's first time like Lando's been second in the driver standings in his career. You know, is now, right? Like that's huge. I mean, this is big for where this team has come from. I mean, if you were to go back to the start of the season, Adam, and I were to say to you that Lando Norris is going to be second in the drivers' championship by the time we get to race 9, 10, like what would you have said?
I mean, I wouldn't have computed. I wouldn't have believed. As I told you with the Bahrain episodes, you were like, it's going to be close. It's going to be close. Again, I didn't believe you, man. I believed you because I know you and I know that you wouldn't just say that. But it was also like, man, that's really hard to imagine. And here we are. So I don't know, Tim. I'm excited.
I know a couple things. I think, Adam, I may know a couple things. I don't know.
Yeah, just a little bit. Your prediction is coming true in the best way. It's fun. It's fun to see this. 4 different pole sitters in 4 different races. How great is that?
Awesome, man. It's awesome.
That's what we want. And there's probably 4 or 5 legitimate cars by the end of the season, which is great too. So let's go.
We're gonna get great racing from here on out, man. Like I think the thing I said this to you like before we got going in Spain was the fact that this is going to be the track where we find out where everybody is, where we see every single team and where they currently are. And that puts to rest the 4 or 5 races before Spain, puts to rest that we can confirm that McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari, they have all made huge steps forward, and that we are going to go to races now where there are going to be at least 4 teams in contention for race wins, podiums, poles. It's awesome. Baby. It's awesome.
Let's go.
Yeah,
Let's go.
It's great.
All right. So later on this week, we're going to catch up and we're going to talk a little bit about the Austrian Grand Prix, who we think is going to be great there. Maybe we'll have a decision with Carlos. I honestly thought by the end of this weekend, we would have a decision. Spanish Grand Prix, perfect place to do it. Yeah. No, nothing. So we'll see. But Tim, until then, have a great week, my friend.
Thanks, Adam. You too, buddy. Talk to you later.